Good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar on making the most of your Employee Safety Reporting Program, or ESRP. I'm Stuart Mader, and I lead the Public Transportation Agency Safety Program, or PTASP, Technical Assistance Center within FTA's Office of Transit Safety and Oversight. We're also joined by Andrew Lofton, a contractor supporting FTA's PTASP Technical Assistance Center. Throughout the webinar, we invite you to type your questions into the Q&A box, and FTA will be reviewing these questions and will provide answers during Q&A at the end of the presentation. These slides and a recording of this webinar will be available on the PTASP Technical Assistance Center's resource library within a couple of days after the conclusion of today's webinar. Our goal for today's webinar is to provide a platform for the industry to discuss ESRP and to promote peer sharing. We hope you'll take the opportunity to add your voice to the discussion by participating in the polls we'll have throughout today's session and entering questions in for our panelists. And I'd now like to hand it over to Andy to go over our agenda. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stuart. And just want to walk everyone through today's agenda, and it's a simple one. We're going to start off our webinar today with an introduction to employee safety reporting programs and provide some content and overview picture of ESRP. Next, for the very exciting part of today's webinar, we're going to hear from two industry speakers who've agreed to share their perspective and experience working with employee safety reporting programs. And then lastly, we're going to end our PTASP TAC webinar today, like we always do, with a Q&A session. And as Stuart mentioned, you can ask a question throughout today's presentation by entering that question directly into the Q&A pod. And we'll be queuing all of those up to provide responses at the end of our session today. So with that, let's move forward. Now, as I've mentioned briefly, we're joined today by two industry speakers, and that's Lizeth Guizar from the Big Blue Bus in Santa Monica, California, as well as Stephen Peganoff, the Director of Safety at Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. And we're going to hear from both of our participants a little bit later in today's session. And we also want to bring your attention to resources and information that can be helpful to you related to today's topic, employee safety reporting, but also any other topic related to safety management systems and the PTASP regulation. And we would direct your attention to the PTASP Tax Resource Library. And at this resource library, you can find a real large store of information, documents, checklists, toolkits, useful resources for you as your transit agency navigates PTASP regulation compliance. And you can find that PTASP resource library at the URL that's posted on your screen right now. And we also understand that individuals may still have questions related to the bipartisan infrastructure law. Now, if you do have questions related to the bipartisan infrastructure law, we would encourage you to navigate to FTA's webpage that's been set up just to answer questions for the transit industry related to the bipartisan infrastructure law. And again, that's the link halfway down your screen there, www.transit.dot.gov/BIL. And also, if you have a specific question that you think you need answered, feel free to reach out to FTA. FTA has established a specific inbox for bipartisan infrastructure law questions. That's also on your screen, FTA-IIJA@dot.gov. And again, you submit that question there, FTA will be able to respond to any question you have regarding the bipartisan infrastructure law. And with that, I'm going to hand the microphone back over to Stuart to talk a little bit about our feedback process. Stuart?
Thanks, Andy. We want to take a minute to thank everyone out there who's filled out surveys for our previous webinars and provided feedback. Your feedback helps us continue to deliver resources and tools that are most relevant to your needs. And based on your feedback, we're continuing to evolve the webinar format. So you'll hear from more voices, including the industry speakers who will offer their perspective and insight today and throughout future webinars, audience polls, which we'll again do throughout this webinar at key points during the presentation, as well as new formats like the mailbag episode that we published for our last webinar to answer your PTAP questions. And at the conclusion of today's webinar, you'll have another opportunity to share feedback in a brief survey, and we very much look forward to your feedback on all these changes and on the content of today's webinar. And with that, let's go to our first poll question. We'll bring that up and it'll appear momentarily on screen. And as soon as it appears, feel free to respond to the poll. And the first question is, have you, think of this as a question for in your own individual role or perhaps in a past role, if you were in a frontline role, have you reported safety information to your agency's ESRP? We'll give it just another couple of seconds. All right, so looking at our results, 50% of you say yes, 34% have not yet used an ESRP, and 16% of you is not applicable, and that's understandable. We have a variety of folks on the call in different roles, and not everybody's necessarily in a role that in which you might report. But it's good to see that half of you have used your agency's ESRP and reported safety information. That underscores the value of ESRPs as a way to support and inform the SMS process. And I want to start off our presentation with just a reminder of the requirements of an ESRP in the PTASP regulation. Part 673.23b requires transit agencies to establish and implement a process that allows employees to report safety conditions to senior management. And remember, this includes both directly employed agencies, those who are directly employed by your agency, as well as contractors. And this part also requires transit agencies to establish protections for those who report safety conditions to senior management, along with a list of behaviors that may result in disciplinary action. And let's bring up the graphic where this graphic you may be familiar with. We've used it before, and we use it in many of our PTASP TAC materials to discuss the ESRP process. So the cycle begins when when a worker reports a safety concern to their agency leadership. The agency then analyzes the safety condition through the safety risk management process. And as noted, if a reported behavior, the reporter is protected as long as the behavior that in their report is not on the list of or description of behaviors that are subject to disciplinary action. As long as it's not on that list, the reporter is protected from discipline. The agency then documents any safety actions it takes in response to the worker report. And if the worker has identified themselves, communicates back with the worker to let them know how the safety concern has been addressed. And I'll now hand it back to talk about how this process supports your agency's safety management system, SMS. Andy?
Thank you, Stuart. And in thinking about ESRP, we can think about employee safety reporting programs as support mechanisms, excellent support mechanisms for our safety management system. And specifically for our safety risk management, or SRM component of SMS, but also our safety assurance, or SA component of an agency safety management system. And it might be pretty obvious to understand why, but it's important for us to think about that for a second. So number one, ESRPs are going to be helpful in allowing an agency to identify hazards. Right? Number two, ESRPs can be very useful for an agency to ensure that its mitigations have been implemented as intended. Also to ensure that those mitigations are being effective. In other words, they're doing what they were designed to do. And ESRP can help provide great information to confirm that as well. And also, very importantly, is that ESRP can provide a snapshot and it can provide alerts to the agency on safety concerns that are being experienced, being observed very quickly by frontline personnel. Now, besides being a support mechanism for those two components, it's also valuable for us to consider that an ESRP is going to be a very important data collection mechanism. Right? An ESRP can be a very rich source of data and information for a transit agency. And that's data and information that without an ESRP could go completely unreported within an agency. And if we compare information gathered through other methods throughout the agency to an ESRP, we see that employee safety reporting programs can often provide information that is more timely, right? It may come immediately from frontline personnel, right? And typically this will come immediately after one is observed. We also see that the information collected through an ESRP is diverse. And what we mean by that is that it's going to be coming from different parts of the organization, different parts of the operations. Employees with different roles, employees with different experience levels and backgrounds. So the information that we get in really has the opportunity to provide us a wide range of perspectives. And third, the data that can be collected is comprehensive, and that it's not a one and done snapshot of safety at our agency, and instead repeated reports of a similar nature in a similar location can help an agency reveal trends that are happening within the organization. Now, it's important to recognize also that the PTASP regulation does not prescribe required methods. It doesn't tell transit agencies how they have to carry out their employee safety reporting program. But agencies have submitted agency safety plans for voluntary review by the PTASP Technical Assistance Center. And so FTA has seen a lot of the different mechanisms that agencies are deciding to use to develop and to implement their employee safety reporting program. Number one, a pretty obvious one is that we're all familiar with the hotline, a phone number that employees could call to report safety concerns. Obviously, paper forms are used widely by transit agencies. We've also seen the distribution of surveys to solicit employee reports from frontline workers. Also, employee safety reporting programs we've seen leverage face-to-face, in-person collection of information through situations like safety meetings or briefings or toolbox talks. A lot of agencies have reported using spreadsheets or databases or other internal platforms that are shared across departments or within a single department to manage information collected through this employee safety reporting program. And also, we've seen a number of agencies that are using specific smartphone or tablet apps that allow their workforce to quickly and easily enter these safety concerns into a system. So it supports quick entry, but it also supports an easier analysis and processing of the information that is collected. So again, FTA hasn't prescribed specific requirements for the mechanisms that agencies have to use. We thought it was very important to show you some of those methods that transit agencies are using to carry out compliant employee safety reporting programs. And with that, that brings us to our next audience poll. And so just like our last one, in a moment, you'll see a panel pop up on your Zoom screen. All right. And so our next question is, what methods does your transit agency use to capture safety concerns? And we've set this poll question up trying to get multiple responses. Very often agencies are going to use multiple mechanisms to capture employee safety reports. So please select all that apply for your agency. All right, we'll give everyone time to get their entries in, and then we'll take a look at the results. Okay. All right, get some pretty interesting results. It seems that the two number one mechanisms that agencies are using, and again, I probably wouldn't imagine that an agency would be using only one of these mechanisms, but the two most common, paper forms, right? I think probably pretty obvious, as well as meetings. So using meetings to capture this information for employee safety reporting program. Looks like we've got, when it comes to software and data collection apps, a little bit lower, 38%, which is also in line with the number of agencies using phone lines, at least with our participants today. And then a little bit lower for surveys and other mechanisms. All right, so thank you all very much for giving us a snapshot into how you do it. And let's go on to our next poll. So you just told us about methods you use to capture that information. Now we'd like to find out, once that information comes in, what are the mechanisms that your agency uses to manage it or to track those things? Right? And so thinking about maybe it's a spreadsheet or a database or a software application you have internally, or maybe some other mechanism. Okay, excellent. It looks like most of us are dealing with some shared spreadsheets to track the data that we're collecting, and almost half of our participants today report using some software applications to manage all that information. So that's really helpful. It's good for us to understand where our participants are today, and I think it'll be even more useful with this context when we begin to hear from our industry participants today. And so I want to thank everybody for your engagement. This kind of participation makes our webinar experiences a lot more beneficial, not only to FTA, but I think to all of our participants. So thank you for that engagement. And I'm going to hand the microphone back over to Stuart. Stuart?
Andy, thanks so much. It is really a variety of reporting methods being used and the approaches to tracking. That's fantastic. I want to touch on one other topic before we introduce our industry speakers, and that is employee safety reporting policies. In line with what Andy said before, this is not required by the PTASP regulation, but it is something that agencies may find beneficial, and that is to establish an employee safety reporting policy, in essence, a formal statement that reflects the agency's commitment to the employee safety reporting program, and also include guidelines for reporting and establishing employee protections. And those guidelines can include things like who can report, how to report, what types of concerns to report, what not to report, and how submitted information will help the agency address safety concerns before a safety event occurs. This is also an opportunity to establish the required protections for employees who report safety concerns to senior management, and an opportunity to describe the behaviors that are not protected. So it's an important tool for communicating management and agencies' management's commitment to safety reporting, and to help agencies understand, again, how the information that they provide, the individual reports they may provide, how those can help the agency proactively address safety concerns. And so with that, now that we've refreshed our memory of the requirements and some of the considerations, we'd like to introduce our industry speakers. And we will begin first with Stephen Peganoff, Director of Safety for the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, or GCRTA. Steve holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Occupational Health and Safety Management from Slippery Rock University, and has been a board-certified safety professional for more than 25 years. Steve came to GCRTA from the Ford Motor Company, where he was the plant safety engineer for a large truck assembly plant, serving as subject matter expert in ergonomics, safety, industrial hygiene, and fire protection. And he's been the GCRTA Director of Safety since 2019 and has more than 16 years of experience in transit safety. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stuart. Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate that introduction. Again, I am the Director of Safety at GCRTA, and I'm here to share and present on our employee safety reporting program. Next slide, please. So on the left is a copy of our non-punitive hazard reporting policy. It's signed by our General Manager and Chief Executive Officer, who is also our accountable executive. And this document is contained within our agency safety plan. It's used to advise all employees, both members of the ATU and management, that there shall be no retaliation or discipline surrounding employee hazard reporting. It supports a good safety culture, and it promotes employees working together to improve practices and conditions where more risk than necessary may be present. and it reinforces anonymity when the employees request it. Next slide, please. So Greater Cleveland does agree that a procedure is necessary to guide the process. And on the left is a copy of page 1 of ours, which we call SOP number 8.1, Hazard Reporting and Management Procedure. It's part of our safety management system online library that all employees can access and utilize. And it's also a minimum standard of safety as agreed upon by our state safety oversight. Details within the SOP include purpose, objective, responsibilities for everyone involved in the process. It talks about the sources of hazards and how to use the hazard report form from start to finish. As you can see, our procedure started in 2006, and it has had some updates throughout the years, including one that was completed last month because our manager of safety here conducted a safety assurance internal safety audit and identified some items that needed to be updated. So if I was to give you some advice on developing a new procedure, write down on paper what works for your organization, practice it, put it through some test runs, and then keep an ISO principle in mind when you're managing it. And that is to do what you say and say what you do, because it'll help you resolve hazards. Everyone will understand what the expectations are, and it will hold up to any audit that you might have to undergo. Next slide. So to dig a little bit deeper in sources of hazards, which are in our program or our SOP, we would start with the hazard report form. And that form does not have to be signed by employees and can be placed in an anonymous Dropbox located throughout all of our facilities at GCRTA. Employees are also free to call our safety hotline. They can inform a member of their local safety committee, whether that member is an ATU fellow member or a member of management. They can inform their direct supervisor, or they can send an email to the safety department using a generic email address that we have set up in our Outlook email system so that we can all get that email in a timely fashion and react accordingly and with some priority. And we don't exclude any internal or external sources whereby those sources might generate some hazards recommendations or CAPs, if you will, corrective action plans. For example, a fire department might perform an inspection on one of our properties, and a suggestion for improvement or a compliance item coming from them would be tracked using our hazard reporting system as well. Other examples include insurance company inspections, anything done by our state safety oversight partners, or even informal inspections done by supervision, whereby a corrective action couldn't be immediately put in place to resolve the hazard, and it needs to be tracked. Next slide, please. So here is our hazard report form on the left. Again, it's part of our SOP number 8.1 as an attachment. And we also print it locally and have it distributed throughout all of our facilities for easy access by employees so they can fill them out and submit them accordingly. On the right, you see our employee safety hotline business cards, and we've produced those so that we can advertise and promote that safety hotline phone number for use, and know that a member of the safety department attends and instructs during all new hire employee orientation sessions so that we can distribute these cards and walk them through our employee safety reporting program procedure. Next slide. So tracking and follow-up is very important. We use what we refer to as a smart log to capture and track all hazards in one location and report regardless of the source. And it includes corrective action plans from investigations, as well as internal safety audits, SSO triennial audit corrective action plans, hazards as we're discussing, actionable items from FTA safety advisories, and really anything else that we feel needs to be tracked to resolution because it may take some time and we need to keep our eye on the ball. Next slide. So our safety data analyst uses the log to solicit regular updates routinely from responsible parties until those hazards have what we would refer to as evidence of closure before we put those in our files and consider that hazard completed. We also use this log or report to identify due and overdue hazard corrective action dates so that we can place those items on our agenda at our executive safety committee so that we can facilitate a dialogue between the responsible parties and everyone else participating in the meeting to ensure that we don't have any impediments or hurdles to getting the hazard resolved in a timely fashion and with the correct resources. We also use this to communicate monthly with our state safety oversight. And we have begun reviewing closed hazard reports in our new Labor Management Safety Committee meeting to ensure we close the loop with our ATU partners. Next. And so I thought I would close by mentioning that our employee safety reporting program is described in our agency safety plan. We're part of the directory if you'd like to take a look at it. And I would say to everyone who sees this presentation, they should feel free to give me a call or drop me an email if they have any questions. I'd be glad to help them out, answer questions, as well as share templates and documents that they may find themselves in need of. So thank you for asking me to participate this afternoon. And I hope you found my presentation beneficial.
Steve, thanks so much. That was a really helpful presentation. Really great to see what GCRTA is doing with your ESRP. As a reminder to our audience, if you have questions for Steve, please enter them in the Q&A pod, and we will answer them during the Q&A session a little bit later on. And now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Ms. Lisette Guizar, Transit Safety and Training Officer, Training Manager for the Big Blue Bus in the city of Santa Monica, California. Lisette Guizar has over 18 years of public transit experience in safety, training, and security, as well as significant experience in risk management. She has served as the Safety and Training Manager for the City of Santa Monica's Department of Transportation for the past 7 years. Lisette is chiefly responsible for the planning, development, and implementation of all components related to Big Blue Bus's agency safety plan. Lisette is also skilled in disaster and emergency preparedness, accident investigations, occupational health and safety compliance, and training techniques. Lisette has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in public administration. Lisette, the floor is yours. Lisette, sorry to interrupt. I think you might still be on mute.
Oh my goodness, I was. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for us of those in the West Coast. My name is Lisette Guizar, and I'm the Transit Safety and Training Manager for the Department of Transportation, City of Santa Monica. And today I'm going to talk about our employee safety reporting system for the Big Blue Bus, which we call SHARP. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little background on our agency, the Big Blue Bus is a division of the City of Santa Monica's Department of Transportation. We have a staff of about 470 employees, a fleet of 195 buses, and we cover 58 square miles within the greater Los Angeles area. Next slide. So our employee safety reporting system, or ESRP, the name of it is SHARP, which stands for Safety Hazard and Analysis Reporting Program. We rebranded it back in 2019 when, as we were developing our agency safety plan, we wanted to update the program, and we also wanted an opportunity to be able to push this out to all employees in kind of a fresh new fashion to encourage more reporting. So we came up with the name Safety Hazard and Analysis Reporting Program. Next slide, please. So some of the elements of our ESRP, it provides an opportunity to gain understanding about operational concerns and hazards through the hazard identification and analysis. It provides a streamlined reporting process for all staff. So this was really important because as the Department of Transportation, we are not only the Big Blue Bus, but we are also city parking and mobility. And so we wanted to provide a way for all employees to be able to report any hazards or safety concerns in a streamlined manner, so that we are able to utilize this information to implement the reforms as appropriate. The program also provides timely feedback to reporting parties. So we found this to be very important because we want to make sure that the reporting parties are knowledgeable about what we did when it comes to resolving any of these issues. As part of the program, we felt that training and promotion were essential to making the program successful. So this is something that we continuously work on promoting, reporting of safety hazards and concerns. And then the program is also non-punitive. So we want to make sure that employees know that they should feel safe when reporting safety concerns. Next slide, please. So the reporting process is pretty basic. So we have a report form, SHARP reporting form, which is submitted by the employee. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the different ways to submit the form. But the form is submitted and assigned to the safety officer, who begins the investigation and hazard analysis process. The safety officer then reviews the reports with our hazard analysis team. The team consists of someone from the operations department, planning, maintenance, safety, and then appropriate action is taken based on the report. Formal communication of the process that was taken, including the action taken or not taken. Sometimes, you know, the hazard analysis team deems that the concern is actually not a safety hazard. So sometimes there's no action taken. So we make sure that whatever action is communicated to the reporting party via email and also signed hard copy. And the results are documented and maintained. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we feel has been successful for us is really promoting the program, providing training, and then also giving feedback to all staff on what the outcomes are of any issues that are reported. Next slide. So as far as training and promotion, the SHARP program is promoted during our mandatory quarterly safety meetings, which you see pictured here. Everyone is very excited to participate in our mandatory quarterly safety meetings. So we promote it through the safety meetings, tailgate meetings, safety committees, electronic messaging, emails, bulletins, posters. We have a website that we call Safety Share, which is the name of our safety program. So you can find all the information on all of our safety programs and initiatives there. We provide it through new hire training. And then another one that's not included in the slide, but is also very important, is it's promoted by our unions. So our unions are great partners with us. And through their meetings, they also encourage the communicating of any safety hazards and concerns, and they actually will report it to us ourselves. So they are a great resource and a partnership to have. Next slide, please. So this is an example of some of the slides. The next couple of slides are from one of our safety meetings where we try to explain what the program is to all staff, and then how to report. So, you know, we tell them that the program is a way to communicate safety hazards, near-miss incidents, and other safety concerns in a non-punitive, flexible, and easy to access manner. Next slide. So these are all slides from one of our safety presentations, and we talk about, what a hazard or a near miss is. So sometimes people aren't aware that they can also report near misses. So we tell them hazards or anything that you may find out in the workplace, right? So for buses, it could be low hanging branches that may cause bus damage, potholes, poor lighting, anything in your workplace that may be a hazard. And one of the things that we really like to encourage is to also report the near misses, which we don't get enough of. What we want to make sure that employees know is that if something occurred, you almost got into an accident, but you were lucky enough to not get into an accident. We want to know about that as well, because we want to know what we can do to prevent that for the next employee who's going through a similar situation. So we want to encourage near misses and explain what that is as well. Next slide, please. So we have several ways to report the safety issues. We have the paper form, which can be submitted either to the safety department directly, or we also have boxes throughout the facilities where people can just pop them in. We have our own portal. It's an internal portal that we call MyInfoBlue. We have kiosks throughout the facility where people can go into MyInfoBlue and submit the report. And the important part of this is that you can submit it anonymously. So as long as you don't include the name on there, it will electronically submit the report to us, and it could be done anonymously. Or they can also email the BDB Safety email address. And one of the things I really like to emphasize is providing us with written communication. So one of the things that happens often is you'll be walking down the hall and somebody tells me, hey, the stop at 4th and Santa Monica has a cracked sidewalk. And I'm like, I'm very concerned about that. And then I forget. So I want to make sure that we receive written communications so that it holds the safety department accountable, first of all, but also that the employee is able to know what the outcome of their reported concern is. So we always emphasize, while we encourage you to report your safety concerns in any way possible, right? Whether it's verbal or nonverbal, written communication always works best, because you will be assured that you will get a response. Next slide, please. And this is just an example of our reporting form. They can be found throughout the facility. It's also on our Safety Share site. And it's similar to the form that is in the MyInfoBlue. And we try to make it as easy as possible, just very basic, to encourage reporting, because sometimes when you are asked to give out a lot of information, we found that it sometimes discourages employees to report. So we say it's very simple, put as much information as you can as possible, and then we'll follow up with you. Next slide, please. And this is just an example of how to report it through our reporting portal, MyInfoBlue. And again, these are slides that we were showing at the safety meeting, but I just wanted to show you guys how we communicate this information. Next slide, please. One of the things that I found that is really important is to always provide feedback on the outcomes. So we do it not only to the reporting party, but to all staff. So one of the things that we do is when we have the quarterly safety meetings, we communicate all of the hazards or near misses or any of the sharp reports that were submitted throughout that quarter. And we let employees know what where the status of it is. So for example, we'll say through this quarter, it was reported that westbound Ocean Park and on 17th, MCOs are finding it difficult to make a right turn at that intersection. So what we did is the city moved the limit line, so they all know that that's been resolved. Sometimes we can't resolve things, so we'll also let them know as well. So we'll say it was reported that at 6 in Oxford, there's a fence that's creating a blind spot. At this time, we can't do anything about it because LA Metro owns the building. And so we'll give them information on what the status of each one of those is, and then we'll keep it going until it's resolved. So we find that communicating the outcomes is helpful for us, because if someone is reporting things and they feel like nothing is being done about it, then they'll eventually stop reporting. So we want to encourage people to report, and we want to let them know that we are listening. So that is all for me. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks so much. That was a fantastic presentation. Great to see that insight. And a reminder again to our audience, if you have questions for Lisette or for Steve, please enter them in the Q&A pod. We're already see some questions coming in, and that's great. And we will get to answering those very, very shortly. Before we do that, and as we get set up for Q&A, just a couple of reminders. One is that the TAC continues to operate as help desk to assist the transit industry with PTASK questions, including questions about ASP development, implementation, evaluation, audit, and oversight. And that also includes voluntary ASP reviews. The TAC is happy to review your ASP against the ASP checklists that are available in the resource library and provide feedback to you that can help with the development of your ASP. And a reminder, those reviews do not constitute acceptance or validation by FTA. They're simply provided as a form of technical assistance. The help desk is also available by phone at 1-877-827-7243 from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday Eastern Time, and via email at ptask-tac@dot.gov.